It seems to me there's something very strange going on with Starfield. The game has been around for 7 weeks at this point, and within that time it has undoubtedly been very divisive. The real question then is, what the heck is going on with that? We're going to talk about that in just a moment, but meanwhile, why not let me know what you think the issue is in the comment section. Elsewhere, the game has some fantastic player numbers and sounds, there's a tidbit of information about Elder Scrolls 6, and there's a great new mod which brings much needed changes to Earth. Let's start then with the issues surrounding Starfield itself as a game. Now, this story began with an increasing number of comments pointing out what's going on with the Steam reviews for Starfield. It turns out that the review score is constantly changing and trending downwards. Yet here's the thing, I think we all know that Starfield has been divisive regardless of what we personally feel or don't feel about it. Yet when I noticed this downward trend in review scores, it felt as though I might be missing something. And talking of missing out on things, one thing you'll never miss out on is gameplay captures if you're using Outplayed by Overwolf, the sponsor of today's video. Outplayed by Overwolf is a game capture app that you just won't want to miss. In fact, pick up this app and you won't miss any in-game events again. Simply install the app, tell it which games you like, and then the moment you start playing these games, it will automatically start capturing. And for those games which have support for auto-captured events, it will intelligently capture all those moments. And one of my favourite features of the app is the ability to instantly edit the footage inside the app. No need for additional software. Outplayed is completely free, supports hundreds upon hundreds of games, and you can download it from the link in the video description. Do check it out. Now, the really interesting thing about Starfield is its success in terms of player numbers. We know from previous information released by Microsoft that it's had 10 million unique players. Now, I know what you're thinking, I know what you're going to say, a lot of these are Game Pass players, and you'll likely be absolutely right. Yet, it's also very clear that Starfield has a huge amount of sales. In fact, it was the largest selling game in the US in September, beating out some heavy hitters such as EA Sports, Mortal Kombat 1 and even Armored Core 6. Now, this really goes to show that even with being on Game Pass, a game can still go on to sell loads and loads of copies. The story is also true when it comes to Steam. We can see that yes, there's a drop-off in player numbers. Some might argue this is a fairly big drop-off, but this is pretty typical when it comes to single-player titles. I mean, look at this. The 24-hour peak for Starfield is still around about 41,000 players. And this is kind of where things get really interesting, because, it kind of seems that measuring player numbers is not really a suitable measurement for satisfaction. Yet, when it comes to gaming, player numbers is a subject players like to bring up again and again, and that includes myself. Yet, look at this. Let's try and compare two different games. Yes, these are very different games, but very popular games nonetheless. Armored Core 6, a highly anticipated game, released onto Steam and had an all-time player peak of 156,000 players. That released on the 26th of August, and as of today, had a peak of 6,000 players. That is a massive decrease, a loss overall of 150,000 players. Should that be used as a measurement of player satisfaction or dissatisfaction? Well, clearly not. Armored Core is a single-player game, and if we head on over to the Steam reviews, we can see it's currently sitting at very positive with a score of 94%. Clearly then, a drop-off in player numbers doesn't necessarily or doesn't always correlate to player satisfaction. The point being right here then that player numbers for Starfield on Steam, regardless of the fact that they have dropped, that's not unusual and doesn't necessarily give us much indication as to how and why people feel the way they do about the game. Let's have a look at those Steam reviews. Today, the recent reviews, that's reviews for the past 30 days, is sitting at 61% positive. And this is trending downwards. I also looked at this back on Friday, where it was sitting at 65% positive. So this is continuing to decrease. And I'd be curious to hear why you think this might be happening. Things get a little bit more interesting when we take a look at the recent reviews over the past 7 days or so. I took the past around about 2,300 reviews, a little bit less, which equates to around about 6 to 6.5 days, not quite a week. And we can see this breaks down as follows. 1,209 people not recommending versus 1,078 actually recommending. So yeah, as I said earlier on, this one is certainly a bit of a rabbit hole, and it's one that ties into some larger themes, notably the structure of the space games themselves, and that's something I'm going to be looking at in an upcoming video, so do keep an eye out for that. I will point out one thing here though, quite a lot of these reviews seem to have 0 hours on record for the past 2 weeks, and essentially what's happening here is it seems that people are not playing the game for 2 weeks or more and then posting reviews. And really, I'm not at all sure if that's normal when it comes to Steam reviews, but nonetheless it is an interesting piece of information. Okay, so moving on, here's an interesting one for you. This is a little bit of information for Elder Scrolls 6. Now of course, we've got no official information about this beyond the fact that the game has been announced. Yet we now have a few tidbits of information from Bethesda's ex-design director, Bruce Nesmith, all thanks to an interview with the podcast MinMax. Now Bruce had previously worked on a whole bunch of Bethesda titles, including both Oblivion as well as Skyrim. Now Bruce left Bethesda back in 2021, but he still has some insight as to what Bethesda may be doing with the next Elder Scrolls title. Most notably, he expects that the game will have an evolution of Skyrim's magic system rather than an evolution of Oblivion's magic system. He goes on to explain that generally, when it comes to sequels, you like to evolve upon what you've already got. This is a quote from him. He says, "You can't throw everything away, you can't keep everything, you can't update everything. You've got to have something in all 3 of those buckets, you know. But 3 iterations down the road, one of those buckets may be empty from what was there 3 versions earlier." And we kind of see this with Bethesda titles all the time. Skyrim, for example, is quite a bit different from Oblivion, and Skyrim is actually very different from Morrowind. It seems then, the further along we get, the more these Bethesda titles are starting to diverge away from what made them initially popular. Now, this will be a very good thing if you liked Skyrim and want to see an evolution of that, but will probably be less of a good thing if you preferred Morrowind and would like to see an evolution of that. So, not a whole load of information about Elder Scrolls 6 there, but it does give us a little bit of an idea as to what to expect, or perhaps more importantly, what to not expect. Elsewhere, we have a rather interesting mod for Starfield called Human Activity on Earth, Man-Made Points of Interest, and you can see that text on the screen right there if you want to search for it on Nexus Mods. Now this one is pretty interesting because for any of those of you who have visited Earth within the game, you'll have noticed that it is an absolute barren wasteland. Now this is pretty good in the sense that yes, it makes you wonder what happened to Earth, and there's a lot of desolation there. There's also a few recognisable points of interest scattered around. However, overall, Earth just tends to be a bit too dead. You'd have thought that after all this time, there would still be a few settlements there and other activity. Well, this mod actually fixes that problem. Earth currently in Starfield is flagged as not suitable for human presence. That means there's absolutely nothing there. This mod fixes that, changes the flag, which means it will be populated with the regular points of interest that you can find on other planets, and that can be areas where ships land. You may find pirate activity there, or you may find the usual points of interest such as abandoned outposts. All of this gives you a bit of extra stuff to check out when visiting Earth, and will give it a little bit more sense of life, but will do so without actually filling the planet full of life, so a nice balance there. That then is a bit of a roundup for information and news on Starfield, and a little bit mixed in there with Elder Scrolls 6 as well. Do let me know your thoughts and feelings about all of this in the comments section. Also, my thanks again to Overworld for sponsoring this video. Do check out those links.